Hi, Kevin Ledoux, the Pragmatic Luther. Today I've got a short video dealing with sharpening in response to a comment that I read just yesterday on a recent video. I was asked if I might show what I use to hone my tools with and what I use to strop them in particular. So I thought I'd do just a quick tour of what I do and offer maybe some suggestions. Not so much a tutorial on how to sharpen, but just quickly what my technique is, because really sharpening isn't that difficult. It's just a matter of getting a hold of the tools and equipment that seem to work best for you, and learning to use them correctly so that you get sharp edges. And you know when they're sharp because you can hear it, you can feel it when they're cutting properly. So the first thing that I start with is one of these two devices right behind me here. Now we'll get in a little bit closer and I'll show you some of the particulars. If I have a chisel that's really in good shape, that is, if it's a good clean chisel and the edge doesn't need to be reshaped, but it needs to be reground so as to reestablish the hollow grind in it, or to just touch up that angle a little bit. Sometimes just honing won't do it, and you need to do a little bit of reshaping. My choice is this Torx sharpener. Now, they're not paying me. They don't know I'm saying a word about this. And I'm not touting this as the latest and greatest. I'm sure there are other manufacturers that are just as good, maybe better. I don't know. I've had this for 10 years or a little more, and I liked it as soon as I bought it because it suits my needs. And that's the only reason. It has nothing to do with whether it's any better or worse than anybody else's. Um, But the neat thing about this is if you have an edge that's in reasonably good shape, that is, if you've got a pretty decent angle and you got something better than a butter knife, like this chisel right here, if you look at this edge, doesn't that edge doesn't look all that bad, but you look at this side, you can see that it's got chips in it and it's actually rounded back on this side. This thing is much better right now than a putty knife. And so it needs to be completely reshaped. This tool will do it, but you'll be all afternoon doing it. So that's not what I use it for. But you can set up chisels, knives, so on, plain blades. I guess even you can even do joiner knives on these or something like that. What's neat about the system is that once you've got it set up to do the work, the wheel runs at a low speed, and it has water over it constantly, which means it's washing away whatever grindings and swarf are forming on the underside of that blade. And eventually, this may take time, and you see I'm constantly in motion here. You have to be, to keep the wheel flat and to keep the chisel also flat across that surface. Keep your cutting edge straight and hopefully nicely square to the edge of the chisel is nice. So after you've done that for long enough, and long enough depends on how bad the chisel is, I suppose. But I'm going to pull that out of there, even though it's premature. You can barely see where it started to make any difference on that. But eventually, it would turn out to be more like this. You can see, I think you can see, the grinding marks on this. They're nice straight marks left by the wheel. Now, I have also honed this chisel, so we're going to go backwards a little bit before we get to the final point. But the grinding wheel over here leaves you with that nice clean surface. The next thing that I want to do, however, I'm going to set this aside. The manufacturer tells me that I can go right to this leather wheel, which is impregnated with a honing compound. It's this stuff here. I don't know what the compound actually is, but it doesn't matter. What I like to use now are these sharpening stones. And I'm going to bring it down and get you in a little bit closer here, because this I think you want to see a little closer. I have Japanese water stones, and I have a medium stone and a fine one. I don't know what the grits are exactly. It doesn't really matter to me. But I have these. I've had them for, I don't know, a good 25, maybe 30 years by now, and they're still in great shape. And if you use a flattener, you can reflatten these periodically, and they hold up just perfectly. So what I'm going to do um, after I've ground over here, uh, I'm going to take that edge, and it's not going to work on this chisel because this needs a lot more grinding on the Tormek as well. But just as a demonstration, because I don't want to mess up the chisels that are pretty well finished. Um, keep your surface wet, of course, and I want to find that angle. Now you can buy honing guides for this if you want to, and all sorts of, I'll say it again, slick exotic stuff to make this supposedly easier. I've tried 3 or 4 different honing guides, and I think they're a crock of horse hockey. There, I said it, and I'm glad I did. You can find that angle with practice, and rather than doing a bunch of swirling around and racing back and forth, that's all a waste of time because it causes you to change position. You don't need to, especially with a slow grinder like this, so that you've got a pretty clean edge to start with. You don't need to do a lot of work over here. So I'm just going to find that angle, and I'm going to pull back. Whoops, little slippage there. Watch out. You see, I'm just pulling back, and I'm identifying that angle every time I set that chisel down. And if I want to do this in quick swirls and fast motions, it's probably not going to be as accurate for me. So I like this technique, and I'm using the entire stone. I'm not just going to use a little bit of it. Now, I've seen techniques where, the craftsman will swirl that around. That for some that may work. This is just the way I've learned to do this over the years, and I get really good results. So I'm just going to keep doing it. Another thing that I'm going to do is take that chisel, and I'm going to take the flat surface and pull it across the stone. Now, I'm not going to do that hard because this thing has a wire edge on it that's going to grind into the stone too quickly. But if that wire edge is almost non-existent, you can polish the back of that chisel, and it's a good idea. And in fact, I'm going to do a little sidebar here. Maybe you can see that there's a lot of pitting and rusting on this. If you don't polish that out, when you get to a sharp edge up here, because of the little pits in it, you're going to have microscopically, you're going to have a steak knife. It's not going to hold a sharp edge. So you got to get the underside of your chisel nice and smooth in order for it to hold a good, clean, straight, sharp edge. So after I've done this honing, now I'm going to go back over here to my power sharpener, so to speak, my low speed grinder. And let's get this out where you can see a little bit better. And I'll turn this sideways so that you get a better idea. I'm going to go to my leather wheel, and I'm going to take the chisel in question here. And I'm just going to touch in there and find that bevel again. And I hope you can see this easily. I'm going to find that bevel, and I'm going to hone that edge. Now this is going to practically polish that up, and it will make this sharp, and I mean sharp. But it won't be stupid sharp yet, not quite stupid sharp. But if you look at that edge, you can see the shine that appears on that. And as you look on the back side, that's nice and clean as well. And as you look right at the edge, which you probably can't see on camera, but if you can still see any shine right on that point, it's not sharp enough. You still have a rounded area there that you can, if you can see it, it's round right there. And you may want to go back to your water wheel and take that off, and then rehone and come back to the leather wheel. So we've done the leather wheel, and now we're ready for me, the last step. But before we go there, I want to take you back in time, or back to an old technology, so to speak. And pull out the high-speed grinder. Now, I don't like high-speed grinders too much because two reasons. When you use a high-speed grinder, uh, unless you have jigs to help you identify the correct grinding angle, it's going to be very hard to get the correct angle. It takes a lot of practice. The other thing is you're going to run this at high speed. That's the way it is. It just runs fast. And that's going to build an awful lot of heat. That's why the sparks come off this thing. And if you burn that edge and discolor it, that means that you've softened that steel for a certain distance back into the blade. That then has to be ground off. You can't just hone that away until the color's gone. You're going to have to grind that back until all of that burned metal is gone. So this thing can be nothing but a sad story unless you're real gingerly about what you do. I don't use this to do anything with a chisel or any sharp object unless I've got pretty much a butter knife to start with and I have no choice. I've just got to remove a lot of metal to get a reasonable grind in there. But it can be done with a little bit of practice. You can identify the correct angle with your index finger. For most of you, it would be your right hand. For me, it's my left hand. But by using that and getting a grip on it, you can turn into your grinder and you can get a bevel on that. And you'll want water handy, as you can see over here, to constantly keep that cool. So there's how you can reshape if you really have to. But boy, if you're going to try and sharpen with one of these things, it takes a lot of practice, takes a lot of time to get good at it. And I won't even say that I'm real good at it. When it comes to sharpening bits for my metal lathe and stuff, yeah, this is the only way to go, and it's real easy to do. But for wood cutting tools, not so much. All right, let's go to the last step in the process. So for my final step in sharpening, I just have this really dirt cheap, inexpensive buffing wheel. These are just 4-inch wheels. They come in different sizes, of course, but 4 inches handy on a drill press. I get these at Harbor Freight because they're really inexpensive. I don't think they hold up all that well, but they're not that expensive that you can't go back and buy a couple more of them when you need them. The big thing is that these buffing wheels will load after a while, and if you don't have a way to clean them, they'll get boogers of abrasive in them, and they start to work against you. But that's when you get rid of them, get another one. So anyway, this is my little buffing wheel. This is a buffing compound called Rouge. And I just take that and load the wheel. And you don't have to do that every time that you hone, but periodically you'll need to. So I just take my sharp edge tool and I buff it out. It's really nothing more than that. You're just buffing very quickly. And I buff the back a little bit each time. It helps brighten it up. And I go over that, clean off whatever residue there may have been left by the buffing wheel, and it will sometimes, it'll leave some of that red stuff on there, that rouge. And when I get done, I hope you can see this in the light properly. When I get done, I have an edge that is stupid sharp. A quick addendum to using honing stones. Now, what if you don't have honing stones, or what if you don't have the right ones, or you got an old one that's clogged that was grandfather's or something? I don't know. What if you're like me and you're cheap and you're pragmatic? Well, you can do this even if you don't have good honing stones. You can hone your tools with silicon carbide paper. Now, some of you may laugh, and experienced people might laugh at this, but it works. The trick is you got to get it on a flat surface. Well, what's a flat surface? 1/4-inch plate glass is dead flat. If you buy a really good a stone tile at any of the Home Depots or Lowe's or any of the big box stores like that, you get a stone tile or a marble tile, they're going to be as flat as you need them to be. Even a piece of MDF is going to be flat enough for you to do this. And if you take silicon carbide paper, which it's always, almost always black, it's always black, wet or dry paper is what you want, and you can tape it down, which won't be quite as good. You can put it down with double-faced tape. It doesn't matter. Spray adhesive, glue it down, and you can make that work. Now, it's not going to hold up like a stone would, and it's not going to last forever, and it's not going to be quite as convenient. You know, let's admit, it is a pragmatic solution if you haven't gotten around to buying stones, or you're not sure which stones you want to buy. Do your homework on these honing stones, because you can buy stones, you can buy diamond honing systems that are really, really good. They get expensive, but they're going to be excellent stuff. So if you're not there yet, what can you do? Well, let's go back to the silicon carbide paper. I'm going to bring you down here a little bit and just give you a quick look at this. You see, if you've got this fastened down on a good flat surface, the flatter the better, you can use that same technique by pulling back and pulling back and pulling back. And the beauty of this is you can go into any auto parts store and a lot of hardware stores, and you can buy silicon carbide paper by the sheet. It's not terribly expensive, and you can get it all the way from about a 220 grit all the way up to 1500 or 2000. So that's how I get to stupid sharp with all of my chisels and plane irons and whatever cutting tools I use around here. I want to remind you that I'm not subsidized, and any of the equipment that I showed you or brand names that I mentioned, I have nothing to do with any of those people. They have nothing to do with me, and I want to keep it that way. At any rate, thanks for watching. Get your tools really nice and sharp. It's really important. And remember, don't cut yourself. Ah, made you look.